In today's video, we're going to be talking about the Do Black Men Need Therapy conversation. Hey everybody, welcome to Pop of Culture. I'm your host, the Esoteric and Facetious, and this is a Pop of Culture, which is my video essay podcast where I speak on pop culture, social justice, and human experience from a black, bisexual, Gen Z, millennial perspective. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the Do Black Men Need Therapy conversation. There was a black female therapist who posted some videos online about black men needing therapy, needing emotional maturity, and things of that sort. And apparently some people are not too fond of that, and it got her fired from her job somehow. So I want to discuss that situation in another video, but in this video I just want to talk about the whole Do Black Men Need Therapy conversation, because I feel like there's some underlying elements of the conversation that I don't like, I want to get into. So let's get into it. So there's been a lot of conversation recently because of this TikTok incident and just other stuff online relating to black men and therapy, black men and emotional maturity, and things of that sort. So I wanted to discuss my thoughts. I personally do feel black men should get therapy. I'm a black man, obviously, and I've been to therapy, and I feel therapy was beneficial to me. I did therapy my senior year of college, and it was very helpful for me because a lot was going on. My senior year, you have to make your plans, your future plans, and also coming back on campus, which was different because we had to leave campus because of the pandemic. Working with students on my job with all these different rules and regulations, especially working in the dorms. There was a lot going on, a new boss. There were so many different changes going on in my life, on top of just me, my life, my experiences, things I've been through. So therapy was definitely a beneficial space for me where I was able to work through things, process things with a mental health professional who I could talk to about different things I was going through and work through things with. So for me personally, therapy was beneficial to me as a black man, and I would suggest other black men get therapy because there's things that black men go through, there's things black men experience, and just black people in general. If you're a black person, especially a black person in America today, I definitely think therapy would be beneficial to you, especially if you're black and LGBT, because there's a lot of stuff that black LGBT youth go through from a young age. So I definitely suggest therapy, and therapy was beneficial to me. But one of my issues with the whole black men need therapy conversation is I feel like a lot of black women are taking this conversation to a place that it doesn't need to go to. Let's get into it. So before I say anything, I want to make the disclaimer. I am somebody who tries to be an ally to black women. I try to support and advocate for black women in the ways that I can, but I'm all about accountability on this channel, and I believe accountability can go in a lot of different ways and directions. So I don't want people to think I'm attacking black women in this video, but I do want to hold black women accountable in this conversation because I feel like that's something I'm not seeing said a lot in this conversation. I do think that black men should get therapy. I do think black men as adults are responsible for their emotions. I, as a black man, as an adult, am responsible for my emotions. No one else is responsible for my emotions. I and all other black men who are adults need to be the one taking care of my emotions and regulating my emotions. It's nobody else's job. But one of my struggles with this conversation is I feel like it's slowly being corrupted by some of these black women who have been hurt by black men who have not healed from their hurt from black men. What I mean by that is there is this group of black women who have been hurt by black men who have this personality trait of niggas ain't shit, black men are trash, I'm never gonna find my black king, so I'm just gonna drag every black man I see every chance I get. I'm gonna say that all black men cheat, that no black men are loyal, that no black men are good. And because they've been hurt by a black man or black men in the past, whenever they get the chance to, they bring up niggas ain't shit, and it comes in so many different forms. A lot of the anti-black man sentiment I see is in divestment and divestment conversations. This is all gonna relate back to some mental health stuff. We'll get there. I just wanna walk y'all through what I'm thinking about. So in my experience, there are some black women who've been hurt or let down by black men in their past. I've seen that with some black women, and I see this especially with the divestment conversations. Now, there are two types of divestment. There's the divestment that is an acknowledgement of, you know what, if I want to have a long-term monogamous relationship and I want to find partnership with somebody who's going to actually support me and provide for me and provide for a family, have kids with me, and be that stable man who can provide for us and father the children, actually show up for the children. If I want that, I may need to cast my net wider than just black men. I may need to extend my dating pool to non-black men, because if I'm solely looking for a black king who can do all of those things, I may be looking for a while and I may miss an opportunity with a non-black man who can provide that. I'm cool with that divestment. I'm cool with this idea of wanting black love but not being sold on black love so much that you miss out on opportunities with other people if the black people in your area aren't checking for you. But there's also this form of divestment, which is I've been hurt by black men, so I'm going to vilify black men I'm going to vilify the Black community using terms like Blackistan to describe the Black American community. I'm going to vilify Black men in the Black American community, and I'm going to praise and uphold non-Black men as inherently better than Black men. That's the form of divestment I see with some Black women who've been hurt by Black men, who refuse to do the healing to realize those Black men who hurt me are not for me, but they're not all Black men. When I go into this conversation about Black men and mental health, one of the issues I have is I keep seeing this conversation co-opted by Black women who have been hurt by Black men who have this personality trait of niggas ain't shit, niggas ain't shit, niggas ain't shit, where a valid conversation about Black men needing to be emotionally mature, needing to be held accountable, this conversation is being co-opted by people whose whole personality or a large part of their personality is saying niggas ain't shit, they're dusties, this, that, and the third. So for me, one of the struggles I have is I do think the conversation of Black men needing therapy is valid and it's a real conversation that should be had. So one of the struggles I have when I hear this conversation of Black men needing therapy is some of these women, from what I'm hearing from them and from the things they're saying, what I get from them is they're saying Black men need therapy, but what I'm getting from what they're saying is the Black men they've been around have hurt them, and so now they're projecting that onto all Black men. And obviously I'm a Black man, so obviously there's bias there, but I am trying to listen to Black women and what they're saying. My struggle with this conversation is I do feel Black men should get therapy, and I do think that Black men should work on their emotional maturity. But one of the problems I feel is some of the people who are participating in this conversation don't have pure motives. And what I mean by that is some people, they are pushing this niggas ain't shit narrative of Black men are trash because they're hurt. And the reality is, if we're gonna have an objective conversation about Black men and mental health, we need to leave our own trauma at the door. And it's a complicated thing because if you've been hurt repeatedly by Black men, you should share those experiences of that hurt so other Black men don't hurt other Black women. But at the same time, if you're coming into the conversation with this need to push Black men down collectively because of your experiences with certain Black men, I feel like you're not being objective enough to push the conversation forward. So that's one of my struggles with this conversation. I do believe that Black men should get therapy, but I feel like some of this conversation is pushed by people who need to do their own healing, where you need to heal from the hurt that you've experienced with Black men that's causing for you to make these sweeping, broad statements about Black men in general. I don't think there's an issue with calling out Black men needing therapy, but I do think there's an issue when your own personal pain about isolated incidents that you've experienced is causing for you to make judgments about a whole community of people. And this is something I wanted to get into because I saw a lot of tweets that were saying things along the lines of, one of the reasons why I can't find a long-term partner, why I can't have that long-term relationship, get married, and start a family is because the Black men I've come into contact with were not emotionally mature, and I will not be able to get married and start a family if Black men collectively don't get therapy. And this is something I feel complicated about because I don't want to invalidate the experiences of Black women. If a Black woman is saying the reason why I can't find love and settle down is because the Black men I've been around aren't emotionally mature, I don't want to invalidate that, but it also kind of raises the question of what Black men are you interacting with? Because I do believe there are emotionally mature Black men. I know there are emotionally mature Black men who are going to therapy, who are seeking out mental health resources, who are doing the work. So one of the questions I have with conversations like this is there a pattern with Black women who feel they're not able to find partnership with emotionally mature men? Is there a pattern in the Black men that you're coming into contact with? Is it the men you're choosing aren't fond of mental health, or is it most Black men are not engaging with therapy? And I guess there's crossover with that. Maybe in some ways she's choosing Black men who don't have adequate emotional maturity, but maybe the overall trend of Black men not being in therapy and getting access to mental health resources, maybe both of those are coexisting, where it's not just her choice, it's also the general lack of Black men in therapy. So it's like it's not all on her, but it's also not all on Black men. That's my struggle. I know there are Black men who are emotionally mature or working towards emotional maturity who are doing that work. So the question I have is, how do we connect the Black women who are doing the work with Black men who are doing the work? And this is a very complex conversation because I feel like with a lot of the ways that we meet people, a lot of ways that people connect with dating and things of that sort, we're not necessarily looking for emotional maturity when we're at the club. We're not necessarily looking for emotional maturity when we're swiping on a dating app. I feel like when we're walking down the street, if we're looking at people and you're looking at potential people who you may be interested in, I feel like a lot of people are not necessarily looking for emotional maturity initially when it comes to relationships. And also too, one of the problems I have with this conversation is, how can we have this conversation without it turning into a niggas ain't shit conversation, a thinly veiled niggas ain't shit conversation? Because that's the thing I want to talk about. I feel like there is a way to facilitate conversations about this without allowing Black women who've been hurt to project their pain onto everybody else and to project their pain onto men who they have never met. Like I said before, I think there's a way for Black women to share their trauma and their pain with Black men without them co-opting conversations and turning them into conversations that they never really were. I agree that there are some Black men who lack emotional maturity, and I do think that Black men as adults need to take accountability for their emotions and regulating their emotions. But one of the problems I have is I definitely see Black women who've been hurt taking over the conversation and making these broad generalizations about Black men that are kind of like the divestment conversations, where those Black women are just acting like Black men inherently are just these toxic men who are incapable of improving themselves and making themselves better. So I just feel like we need to figure out a way to acknowledge their pain without allowing their pain to co-opt the conversation. And that's one of the things I also want to talk about in this video is discernment and also healing. Because one of the things I hear about so much when it comes to the niggas ain't shit conversation is I see a lot of Black women who interact with Black men who have hurt them. I've noticed they develop this characteristic of niggas ain't shit, Black men are trash, Black men aren't good. Now, of course, not every Black woman who has a negative experience with a Black man or with Black men is going to develop this trait or characteristic. And there's also Black men who develop this trait or characteristic about Black women, and that's not healthy either. I'm just discussing Black women because that's what's relevant to this conversation. One of the struggles I have with Black women who enter into these conversations about Black men is I feel some Black women, they know that they've been hurt and they acknowledge that they've been hurt, but I don't see them always healing from that trauma and learning from that trauma. And I will say that's something that's easier said than done, and it's something that I've had to learn as somebody who's been through things, learning how to actually heal from the trauma. Because I think that we can all acknowledge if something's hurt us. We can all look at a situation and say, what that person did to me, what that person said to me was hurtful. But the thing I've realized as a young adult who's trying to do the work is it's one thing to realize, hey, I've been hurt by this, but to actually heal from that and to actually learn from that, that's something that's not so easy. And one of the struggles I have with some Black women is, like I said, they get hurt and they get into this mode of niggas ain't shit, but they don't actually learn from those experiences. I don't think that we experience trauma for it to be a lesson for us. I'm not necessarily going to say that trauma is there for us to learn a lesson, because a lot of times bad things just happen to people and there's not necessarily a rhyme or reason to it. But one of the things I've learned is when we heal from these traumatic things that have happened to us, when you heal from trauma, you're able to learn how to move differently. And a lot of times you're able to build discernment. And when you build discernment, you can see things before they actually happen. And not in a psychic sense, but if a Black woman has been hurt by an emotionally unavailable man, she can move differently in the future. I watch Cosmoholics Anonymous, Bo Vintage, I love her videos, shout out to Bo. She's done a lot of videos about her situation with her ex-husband, and even though it's unfortunate that she had to go through that relationship, because she experienced trauma and she's working through and processing through that trauma, now she has more discernment. So if and when she decides to date another man, I'm sure she's going to take the lessons she learned from that negative experience and apply them and use that discernment to not get into another situation like that. But one of the problems I have when it comes to some Black women who have this mentality of niggas ain't shit, who constantly bash all Black men because of their negative experiences with some Black men, is I feel some of them, they get stuck in that hurt and they don't ever get to that point of healing from the trauma, and through healing, gaining that discernment where it's not to say no Black man is ever going to hurt you again, but it's to say you'll have the discernment, and through healing, you'll not put up with it if you see it again. So let's say a Black man was emotionally unavailable with you. So maybe when you start dating again and you meet new Black men, if you see those traits in another Black man, you can either bring it to the surface and say, hey, I was with a partner who was emotionally unavailable. I can't deal with this. So if we're going to be together, then something needs to change. Or you can just recognize the pattern and not go into that situation because you already know what's going to come from it. I think that's the thing I struggle with this conversation of Black men and mental health. I feel like when we go into this conversation, we need to all come into this conversation objectively and say, either from a male perspective of, hey, I'm a Black man and I know I've needed someone to talk to, I know I've needed mental health resources, and I think other Black men would benefit from therapy, or I'm a Black woman who has had experiences with Black men that tell me Black men should get therapy. But I think when you come into the conversation with unprocessed trauma, because I feel like if you've processed and went through the trauma, you can speak to it objectively, but when you're still hurt, then you may be projecting that pain from that painful experience onto people who never hurt you. And that's what I'm seeing in some of these tweets where some of these Black women, it's like they're so hurt from emotionally immature Black men that they're not even considering that maybe if they go about things differently, they may be able to find an emotionally mature Black man who is in therapy or who has done the work. Like I said, I'm going to discuss the whole TikTok situation with that creator in another video. But one of the things I want to say is I think we do have to be careful when it comes to conversations about accountability, because one of the issues I have with some Black women talking about Black men needing therapy is I feel like they're saying the message wrong. And what I mean by this is I do believe Black men need therapy, but one of the problems I have with some of the talking points related to trying to encourage Black men to get therapy is this 100-0 all or nothing mentality I'm seeing. And what I'm seeing with it is I'm seeing some Black women implying that the reason why Black men and Black women can't have healthy relationships is because Black women are coming in healed, unproblematic, 100% mentally there, 100% mentally well and mentally healthy, 100% healed from their trauma, 100% present in the relationship, and the men are coming in zero emotional intelligence and zero emotional maturity. And I feel like the reality of it is Black women and Black men struggle with emotional maturity. There's this idea of Black men being the sole problem in relationships. Like, if Black men could just get their shit together, then everything would be perfect. Now, I feel like because Black men are taught to be hard, and a lot of times hypermasculinity is promoted in Black men, which doesn't encourage Black men to be emotional or process their emotions or be vulnerable, I think that Black men have more work to do when it comes to emotional maturity. But at the same time, I feel like some of these messages that I see are framed from this idea of women not having any work to do. And the reality is there are Black women who have emotional maturity issues. This is not me pointing the finger like, oh, it's not Black men's problem, it's Black women's problem. Black men and Black women need to do the work to be able to sustain healthy long-term relationships with one another. So let me know how you feel. This is a very complicated conversation. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful day. Love y'all. Bye-bye. See you on the next one. Thanks for watching. Like this video if you like this video. Let me know if you agree or disagree with the points I made in the comments below. If you enjoyed this content, definitely like, comment, subscribe, and share. That way, even if YouTube isn't pushing my content, those who resonate with it are sharing it so it can connect with others who would enjoy it. Those are some easy, free ways to support a pop of culture. If you want to support this show financially, feel free to send a tip to my Cash App or buy me a cup of coffee, both in the link below. All who donate will be featured in the credits of my long-form commentary and cover videos. There are 2 playlists that are going to pop up, one where you can binge watch my covers and one where you can binge watch my commentary. Enjoy. Bye-bye.